Have you ever seen cruelty so shocking that it changed everything within minutes? This isn't a story about punishment. It's about justice, respect, and the kind of authority that arrives when the truth can no longer be hidden. She was humiliated, kicked in the head by those who thought their power made them untouchable. But minutes later, three generals stormed the base, and what they did silenced the entire unit forever. Stay with me until the end, because this story will remind you why real power is never about abuse, but about honor. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that hit harder than headlines. The military training ground was brutal that summer. Dust filled the air, boots pounded the dirt, and shouts from drill instructors echoed across the field. Among the exhausted cadets was a young woman named Elena Torres, a 22-year-old recruit who had pushed herself beyond every limit just to wear the uniform. She wasn't the fastest nor the strongest, but her resilience made her stand out. That day, the heat was relentless. Sweat-drenched uniforms and tempers ran short. Elena stumbled during a drill. Her knees scraped, blood smearing into the dirt. Instead of being offered a hand, she was mocked. Two senior cadets cornered her, fueled by arrogance and the toxic belief that her presence as a woman weakened their unit. Words turned into shoves. Then came the unthinkable. One of them kicked her in the head as she tried to stand. The field fell silent. Some recruits gasped, others froze, terrified to intervene. Elena collapsed, dust rising around her as the world blurred. Pain radiated through her skull, but worse than the pain was the humiliation. She lay there, dizzy, fighting tears, not because of the injury, but because she knew this wasn't just an attack on her. It was an attack on everything she had sacrificed to be there. Whispers rippled across the unit. A few recruits wanted to help, but feared retaliation. Others pretended not to see, unwilling to risk their positions. The officers in charge? They turned away, thinking the incident would disappear into silence. But silence doesn't last forever. One recruit, a quiet, observant young man named Daniels, had been recording part of the drill on his phone, intending to study his own performance later. By chance, his camera captured everything: the shove, the kick, and Elena collapsing. Shaking with rage, Daniels didn't just keep it. He sent it straight to his uncle, an assistant to a 3-star general at headquarters. Within minutes, the chain of command was in motion. Calls were made, orders were given, and for the first time in the unit's history, 3 generals were on their way to the training ground, their convoy cutting through the base with an authority no one could ignore. Elena was still on the ground, struggling to sit up when the sound of engines roared in the distance. Dust clouds rose as 3 black SUVs pulled up beside the field. The chatter among the recruits died instantly. Soldiers straightened their backs. Officers froze, and then the doors opened. Out stepped 3 generals in full uniform, decorations gleaming, faces hard with fury. They weren't there for a ceremony. They were there for justice. The lead general's voice boomed across the field. Who struck her? Silence. No one moved. The guilty cadets avoided eye contact, their arrogance melting into fear. The general repeated, slower this time, "Who kicked this soldier in the head?" Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice trembling but firm. "Sir, it was them." He pointed to the 2 cadets who had assaulted Elena. Murmurs rippled through the ranks. The generals turned, their eyes narrowing on the perpetrators. Without hesitation, the generals ordered the unit to fall in line. The 2 cadets were dragged forward. The entire field watched as the generals ripped the insignia from their uniforms, their voices cutting sharper than blades. "You disgrace the uniform you wear. You disgrace the oath you swore. And you dare strike one of your own?" The second general turned to the commanding officer of the training ground. "And you? Why was this tolerated? Why did no one intervene? You think silence protects you? Silence condemns you." The officers stammered excuses, but they meant nothing. Orders were barked. The entire training staff was suspended on the spot. The unit was officially shut down pending investigation. For the first time in years, recruits saw what accountability looked like at the highest level. Elena, still dazed, tried to stand. The third general, surprisingly gentle, helped her to her feet. "Soldier," He said firmly, "You did nothing wrong. They tried to break you, but today you've shown more strength lying in the dirt than they ever could standing tall." Tears welled in her eyes, not from weakness, but from vindication. She had endured humiliation, violence, and silence. But in one moment, she was seen, not as a victim, but as a soldier who deserved respect. The generals ordered a medical team. Elena was taken to the infirmary, but before she left, the lead general addressed the unit one last time. "Let today be a lesson. Abuse is not strength. Violence against your own is not discipline. And silence in the face of injustice is cowardice. If you want to wear this uniform, remember this day, because it will never be forgotten." The incident sparked a wave of reform across the training base. Investigations were launched. Policies were rewritten. Officers who had looked the other way were dismissed. And Elena? She became a symbol, not because she wanted attention, but because her courage forced the military to confront what it had ignored for too long. Months later, when she graduated training, the same general who had helped her stand placed her badge in her hand. "You earned this," he said, "not just in drills, but in the fight you never asked for. Wear it with pride. You've already proven what kind of soldier you are." The recruits who had once mocked her now looked at her with awe. The cadets who had hurt her were long gone, forgotten in disgrace. And Elena? She stood taller than ever, not because of the pain she endured, but because she never let it define her. And that, my friends, is the story of how one act of cruelty exposed an entire broken system, and how 3 generals shut it down in minutes. Elena's scars remained, but so did her strength. She walked forward not as a victim, but as a soldier whose courage changed everything. That if this story gave you chills, if it reminded you that real power is about honor and justice, then make sure you subscribe right now. Because here we tell the stories that others overlook, the stories of ordinary people who rise in extraordinary ways.